They fired the flare because they had no choice. Think about that for a second. 8 Navy SEALs, the most elite warriors America has, men trained to fight in the darkest corners of the world. And yet, on that night, in the black heart of a Philippine jungle, they were dying. Their ammo was running out. Their bodies pressed into mud slick with blood. Every shadow felt like a predator waiting to pounce. The flare cracked open the night sky, a burning orange scream, a desperate signal. Not for victory, not for reinforcements, but for survival. Because these men weren't calling for backup. They were begging for angels. But here's the cruel truth. Those angels weren't coming fast enough. What they didn't know was that someone was already there. Someone sitting in the mud with them. Silent, invisible. Not a SEAL, not one of their brothers in arms, not a warrior they trusted. No, she was the one they had dismissed, the one they had whispered about, the one they had mocked. Echo girl, just an observer, just a desk type, dead weight. Or so they thought. But in less than a minute, 5 shots would tear their doubts apart, and every man in that kill zone would realize the deadliest person among them wasn't the soldier they trained with. It was the shadow they ignored. Let's rewind. Hours before the flare lit the sky, a small Zodiac boat cut across black water. Its rubber hull whispered against the waves, as if even the sea didn't want to be heard. That night, the Philippine coast loomed ahead. Dense jungle like a fortress wall. Salt in the air, the smell of wet leaves, rich earth, and something heavier, something waiting. Lieutenant Cade Monroe kept his eyes sharp, one hand steady on the tiller, the other close to his weapon. He didn't trust the silence. The Pacific is never silent, and when it is, that means something is hiding. 200 meters to beach, Collins whispered from the bow. No lights, sand looks clean. Monroe gave a sharp nod. The ritual began. Boots hit the surf, weapons checked, rucksacks swung onto shoulders, every move silent, practiced, deadly, 2 minutes. That's all it took, because for SEALs, hesitation is death. And then there was her, crouched at the stern, watching, saying nothing. Observer 7, Echo. She didn't carry a long rifle. She didn't carry heavy gear, just a compact pack, a strange case strapped between her shoulders. The men had already made up their minds. She wasn't one of them. She wasn't built for this. Monroe remembered shaking her hand hours earlier. A firm grip, a nod. No smile, no words. When he asked for her name, her voice had been flat, neutral. Echo, Observer 7, that was it. Like the conversation had already ended. As they slipped into the jungle, Monroe's voice cut through the dark. Stay on my hip, no freelancing. You see something, you say it. Clear, her reply was ice cold. Understood. No fear, no nerves, just her flat. But Monroe didn't have time to think about it, because the jungle was swallowing them whole. Vines clawed at their gear. Roots snaked underfoot. The air was thick, heavy, like breathing soup. And deeper they went, the quieter it became. To quiet. No insects, no frogs, no animals moving through the brush. The kind of silence that meant one thing: predators, or worse, men waiting with guns. Monroe's gut twisted. He knew they were walking into something. But what none of them realized was, the quiet observer at his side already saw what was coming. Pause. Because by the time that flare burned in the sky, and the SEALs were begging the night for salvation, she would step out of the shadows and prove to them all that sometimes the deadliest ghost in the jungle is the one you never see coming. The deeper they went, the stranger it became. The jungle wasn't supposed to be quiet. A living forest is loud. Insects buzz, frogs croak, birds cry out in the night. But here, there was nothing. Only the sound of boots pressing into damp soil and the faint hiss of breath under helmets. Every man felt it, every step heavier than the last. It was as if the jungle itself was holding its breath. And when a place that's alive stops breathing, you know something unnatural is waiting. They followed the narrow trail, weapons low but ready. The canopy was so thick, moonlight barely touched the ground. The only glow came from wet leaves catching fragments of silver light. Like shattered mirrors in the dark, Chu suddenly froze. His fist went up. Everyone halted. Something's wrong, he whispered. and he pointed at the dirt dot. It looked too clean. Leaves swept neatly aside. Soil freshly disturbed. Not natural. Not random. Prepared. Monroe crouched, ran his fingers through the earth. Loose. Turned. Like hands had worked it not long ago. That's when a quiet voice spoke from the shadows. This trail has been prepared within the last 48 hours. And not by nature. It was Echo. Observer 7. Her tone wasn't guessing. It wasn't nervous. It was cold. Factual, like she was reading a book. The SEALs glanced at each other. Skepticism. Annoyance. Sanchez raised a brow. You can tell that. From dirt, Echo's pale eyes scanned the trail. Tire tracks don't follow the terrain flow. Ground's been scraped east to west, but water runoff should cut north to south. And those leaves, staged, not natural fall. She looked up, her voice steady. Classic prep for an ambush, an L shape. They want you to walk right into it. Collins let out a short laugh. Didn't know they taught fortune telling at headquarters. They don't. Echo replied. They teach reconnaissance. And with that one sentence, the air shifted, because she didn't sound like a desk officer anymore. She sounded like someone who'd walked into ambushes before and lived to talk about it. Monroe studied her face in the dim light. She wasn't bluffing. Her words carried the kind of weight that came from scars, not textbooks. You're saying we're walking into a trap? He asked. I'm saying, she whispered. Someone's been here recently with hostile intentions, and they know American patrol patterns. The team went silent. That wasn't something you hear from a desk observer. That was fieldcraft, combat knowledge. Sanchez scoffed under his breath. Maybe she's just seen too many movies. But Monroe's gut was twisting. Every instinct he had told him she was. Right? Still, orders were orders. Duly noted, Monroe said flatly. We continue mission as planned. He gave the hand signal. The patrol moved forward. But inside, he couldn't shake the feeling. They had just ignored a warning that might cost them their lives. The jungle narrowed. The walls of vines pressed in tighter until it felt like a tunnel made of green. Every step echoed too loudly. Every rustle felt staged. Sanchez muttered under his breath. Feels like the whole place is holding its breath. He wasn't wrong, because the jungle wasn't alive that night. It was a stage, a trap, waiting for its curtain to fall. And then, it happened. The path opened into a clearing, to perfect, to clean, moonlight shining down like a spotlight. Every SEAL froze, every instinct screamed. Monroe's fist went up to signal halt, but it was already too late. The night exploded. Gunfire rained down from the ridges, flashes from all sides, disciplined fire, overlapping kill zones. This wasn't random. This wasn't luck. This was execution. And the SEALs were standing in the middle of it. Pause. That orange flare was still hours away, but the clock on their survival had just started ticking. And Echo, the woman they didn't trust, was about to reveal the truth she had been hiding all along. The clearing lit up with fire. Bullets tore the night apart. Tracer rounds ripped across the jungle, slicing through branches, sparking against stone, ricocheting in deadly lines. This wasn't random shooting. No, it was planned, disciplined. Overlapping fields of fire, the kind you only see when professionals set the trap. Contact left. Contact right, Monroe roared, but every man already knew. They were surrounded. This wasn't an ambush, it was an execution. Sanchez dove behind a log, his rifle barking back at the ridgeline. Collins slid into a shallow depression, barely 6 inches of cover against the rain of steel. Chip pressed into broken stone, eyes wide, sweat streaming down his face. Monroe dragged Observer 7 Echo toward a limestone outcropping. He expected panic, he expected fear, but there was none. She moved with him, smooth and controlled, like someone who had done this before. No screaming, no freezing, just cold focus. And when the rounds cracked above their heads, she was already scanning the ridge line, not like a victim, like a hunter. A scream cut through the chaos. Sanchez grabbed his thigh. Blood gushed between his fingers. A clean hole, deep, deadly if not treated fast. A medic. Monroe shouted, then cursed. They didn't have one. He fumbled for a bandage, his hands shaking as bullets chewed into stone around them. This wasn't training. This was death closing in. And then Echo moved. She slid across the dirt, pulled out a trauma kit, not standard issue. Something different, something professional. Hold still, she said calmly, wrapping the wound with speed and precision. You're hit in the muscle, not the artery. You'll live if you don't do anything stupid. Her voice wasn't panicked. It was surgical, cold, efficient. The SEALs stared, even under fire. Who was this woman? How did she know this? The gunfire slowed for a moment. Reloading, repositioning. Monroe used the pause to count, at least for positions, maybe more. Professional spacing, professional coordination. This wasn't random rebels. This was trained killers. And then the radio crackled static. No comms, no backup, no way out. Monroe's mind raced. Ammunition was bleeding out fast. They had a wounded man and an enemy who owned the high ground. They weren't just trapped. They were being buried alive. His hand went to his belt. The flare. That final option. The one you only use when everything else has failed. Orange fire meant one thing. We are dying. We need help. But it also meant something else. It gave away their exact position. If more enemies were nearby, they'd all come running. It was a gamble. But Monroe knew there were no good choices left. He yanked the pin. The flare hissed upward, a burning orange sun exploding above the canopy. For a moment, it lit the clearing like daylight. The SEALs' faces looked carved in stone. Fear, anger, determination. The enemy saw it too. The Americans had admitted desperation. They were finished. And then the gunfire returned, harder, heavier, like the flare was a green light for the slaughter. But as bullets chewed into their cover, Observer 7's voice broke through the chaos. Cold, steady. 3 firing positions on the north wall, 2 on the east ridge. Machine gun nest to the west. That's what's pinning you down. Monroe turned, stunned. How the hell do you know that? Her eyes met his. For the first time, he saw something shift. A decision. A truth she had been holding back. Because I've been counting muzzle flashes, timing their fire. And because this isn't my first ambush. She reached into her pack. And what she pulled out was not observer gear. It was a rifle. Matte black. Custom. Deadly. A weapon worth more than most men's lives. Monroe's jaw clenched. You're not authorized to carry that. She checked the chamber, calm, unshaken. Neither are they, she said, nodding at the mercenaries. But they're still shooting at us. And with that, she disappeared into the jungle. Seconds later, a new sound cut through the night. Not the roar of machine guns, not the chaos of automatic fire, but a single crack, sharp, precise, silenced. Up. On the north ridge, one muzzle flash died instantly. Gone. The SEALs froze. What the hell was that? Shu whispered. Another crack. The machine gun nest went silent. The weapon that had them pinned was gone. The battlefield shifted. And in the silence between shots, the SEALs realized their observer wasn't an observer at all. She was something else. Something lethal. Pause. The flare had lit the sky. But salvation wasn't coming from above. It was coming from the shadows, from the ghost they thought was dead. Wait. The silence that followed was louder than gunfire. 1 shot, 2 shots, 3, each one silenced an enemy position. Each one struck with impossible precision. The SEALs huddled in the mud, stunned. They couldn't see her. They couldn't track her. It was as if the jungle itself had grown a rifle and started hunting back. Collins whispered, almost afraid of his own voice. 5 shots. That's all it took. And then came the 5th, a single suppressed crack, followed by silence so deep it felt like the earth itself had stopped breathing. The mercenaries were gone. The trap they built had collapsed, and 8 SEALs, who had been seconds from death, were alive. Alive. Because of her. Slowly, carefully, Monroe raised his head. The ridgelines that had spat fire at them minutes ago were empty. No muzzle flashes, no voices, no movement. Just stillness, broken branches, and the heavy smell of credite drifting in the night. Clear, Monroe called, his voice barely more than a whisper. One by one, the team emerged from cover, faces pale, eyes wide, every man struggling to process what had just happened. Because they all knew no SEAL team in the world could do what they had just witnessed. Not like that. Not that fast. Not that clean dot. And then, from the jungle shadows, she appeared. Observer 7, Echo. Her rifle hung casually across her chest, like it was just another piece of gear. Her steps were calm, her breathing steady. She wasn't shaken. She wasn't rattled. She looked like someone who had simply done her job. Perimeter's clear, she said flatly, checking Sanchez's bandage again. Her tone was the same as it had been hours earlier. Neutral, professional, as if eliminating 5 trained killers was nothing more than a checklist. Monroe found his voice first. Observer 7. What the hell just happened? She looked at him. Her eyes cold, unreadable. You fired a flare requesting assistance, she said. I provided assistance. Collins shook his head, his voice almost trembling. That wasn't assistance. That was execution. He glanced at the others. 5 shots, 5 kills. All clean. I've never seen shooting like that. Echo shrugged, as if it was routine. They chose the wrong profession. If they didn't want to be shot at by someone who shoots back accurately. Shu's eyes narrowed on her weapon. The worn finish, the custom modifications, the optics that definitely weren't standard issue. That rifle, he said. Where did you get it? Her answer was flat. From people who understood that sometimes standard equipment isn't enough. The sound of rotors thundered overhead. The rescue bird, drawn by the flare. The helicopter's spotlight swept across the clearing, catching the seals in its beam, catching Echo too. She looked down at her rifle, checked the safety, and then she shook her head. She wasn't coming with them. Different extraction point, she said. Different mission parameters. Monroe frowned. What mission? Her eyes held his for a moment. Cold, sharp, the kind of stare that didn't give answers. The kind that doesn't appear on charts. As the helicopter descended, Echo reached into her pouch. She pulled out a single brass casing, still warm from the shot that had saved them all. She pressed it into Monroe's hand. Keep it, she said. Remind yourself, sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one you never see coming. And with that, she turned, stepped into the darkness, and disappeared. The jungle swallowed her whole. The SEALs climbed aboard the helicopter in silence. Sanchez was stable. Thanks to her. Every man carried a wound tonight, not all of them physical. As the bird lifted, Monroe sat in the red-lit cabin, the brass casing heavy in his palm. Collins leaned close. Sir, what are you going to put in your report? Monroe stared out at the jungle, already fading into shadow below. All right, he said slowly, that an unknown sniper provided covering fire during enemy contact. Details classified. And if they ask for more, Monroe closed his hand around the casing. Then I'll tell them, some things are above our pay grade. The helicopter banked east towards safety. But behind them, in the jungle, a ghost walked alone. Her name was Echo 7. Her story already a legend. Because 5 shots had rewritten everything. 5 shots, 5 kills, no misses. And if you're watching this right now, ask yourself, what would you do if the quiet observer standing beside you turned out to be the deadliest ghost in the fight?